Hi everyone and welcome to episode 14. In this episode we'll be painting an Asian water buffalo in 1/35 scale. Yes. This is part of the diorama that I'm currently working on from the Vietnam War. Now in Southeast Asian countries the water buffalo is a very important animal to villagers. They're used in the production of rice crops and you can often see them in reference pictures from the war itself. The Vietnamese people have a great fondness for these gentle creatures. The kit I used for this is one from Paracel Miniatures called Buffalo Boys. It includes a resin water buffalo and 2 figures, but today we'll only be looking at the painting of the water buffalo itself. I'll be doing this in 6 basic steps. First, I'll be removing the mold blocks and sealing the seams. I'll be washing and drying the parts as with any resin figure kit. Next we'll be applying a surface primer. I'll be airbrushing a variety of skin colors onto the model. Next I'll be brush painting the facial details, and then finally we'll be applying filters and a wash color. So let's get started. As I said before, the kit contains parts for a water buffalo. Yes, you. And then 2 figures, and today we'll be looking at the water buffalo itself. As always, I make a point of opening these little baggies over a plastic tray so I don't lose anything. And first step is to clean up the parts. That means removing the mold blocks and sanding them. I had some issues getting these 2 halves to match up properly. In the end, I ended up sanding away the tabs, and just to get them flush, they were slightly warped. That was really the only fit issue I had, and when they finally fit together, it fit beautifully. There you go. And all that remained was to glue them together and to fill the seams. As always, make sure to clean resin parts from any resin dust and residue before you do any gluing and painting. Also, and many people don't know this, use CA glue, cyanoacrylic glue, super glue on resin. Ordinary styrene adhesive won't work on resin parts. And there we go, that is the water buffalo. The next step is to use some plastic putty and just make sure that I properly seal all the seams. When building animal models, it's very important to make sure that the surface is very smooth, any skin surfaces. So it's important to properly seal any seams that are visible. Now, having done this, we can move on to the next step, and that is to apply a primer. I'm using Vallejo's black primer. I love this stuff. You can pour it straight into your airbrush from the bottle, and this is now applied to the entire buffalo model in a very smooth and even coat. This stuff is self-leveling. It's one of the reasons why I love it. And this black color, I specifically chose black, is very important later on, as you'll see as we progress in painting the water buffalo. And there you go. We can now move on to the next step, and that is to highlight all the muscle groups. Basically, you can easily spot them. It's all the protruding surfaces. As always, imagine a light source shining directly from above, and that will be a mental guide as to where you need to apply the highlight colors. In this case, I'm using neutral gray, and because I'll be doing some precision airbrush work, I need to drop the air pressure on my compressor way down. That should be sufficient. I now carefully apply the neutral gray to all the highlight areas, and again you can follow the basic muscle groups on the animal, on the legs, the hind legs, the front legs, and also on the belly, the torso section. Very evenly, very lightly. We'll be refining these areas later on. Right now all we're aiming at is to get a high contrast on the animal if you wish, with light and dark. There you go. This is the result we're looking for. All the areas are now perfectly highlighted, and we can move on to the next step. Next, I'll be using NATO Black, and just to make the shadow areas a bit stronger. And again, I'll be using the airbrush and spraying this over all the black surfaces on the animal, just to accentuate the highlights and the shadow areas a bit more. This is very careful, precise work, so take your time, don't rush it, and make sure that your airbrush is set properly to do this. You need to be able to draw a pencil line on a piece of paper. There you go. Now, these animals have a very distinctive blue, gray, black color, but there are some brown hairs visible on the back and on the head. And for this, I'll be using chocolate brown. I'll be mixing a very thin coat of brown and applying this all over the model, just to give it sort of a brownish hue to the color. There you go. And this also serves to blend the highlight and the shadow tones into the skin of the buffalo. With this done, we can move on to the next step. Next, I want to reinforce the black, the dark areas of the skin. And for this, I'll be using Vallejo Black. It's one of the few times I use solid black, but in this case, it serves a purpose. And again, I'm just reinforcing all the dark areas in the skin, just to give that a little bit more contrast, accentuate the different muscle groups a bit more. There's such nice detail on this animal. To give it that characteristic bluish skin color, I'll be using transparent blue. And I now very carefully apply this over the model. This should be a very thin, very light coat of transparent blue. You just want to lightly color the skin. And there you go. If you look at the reference picture at the back, you can see this is a very faithful reproduction of the color of the water buffalo. I'm very pleased with this. Next, we need to paint the inside of the ears. You can see it's a bit of a brownish color. And again, I'll be using chocolate brown. And for this, I'll be using my brush as well. So I use my wet palette and a little bit of chocolate brown color. And this is now carefully applied to the inside of the ears. Yes, my friend. There you go. This is also applied to the horns and the hooves. And again, keep your paint wet, keep it thin. Now in our picture, you'll see these little hairs, very light gray hairs, and these are also applied with a thin brush and some gray. Again, I'll be using neutral gray. There we go. And this is applied in short little strokes to the edge of the ears. Very nice effect. Glad you agree. Some really beautiful detail on this little resin model. And there we go. Very faithful reproduction of the water buffalo's ears. Next are the horns, and first thing to do is to get the light areas, and for this I'll be dry brushing. For dry brushing, I use cash register paper. You buy this in bulk at some stores, and just tear off a little bit, fold the edges over so it lays flat, and I will then use this to prepare my brush. I'll be using neutral gray for the dry brushing color. This is one of the first colors I'll use, and then also a soft bristle brush, much like this. And the trick is now to have as little paint as possible on your brush. And I remove most of it on the paper, and then very lightly I start dry brushing the horns, just to apply some color to the raised detail on the horns. Now this is one of two colors I'll be using for dry brushing. This is just to highlight most of the detail, and the second color I'll be using is Deck Tan. Now this is a lighter color, and this we'll be using a bit more sparingly, just to get a bit more of a dramatic effect on the horns, on the raised detail. Again, remove most of the paint. That should be enough. And this is now brushed onto the horns, and immediately you can see all the raised detail emerging from that color. There we go. I can also apply this to the ears and to the eyes, to the forehead, any of the detail that I want to highlight and make visible. Also the hooves, there's some little hairs on the hooves. It works beautifully for that. The tail. Don't forget the underside of the ears. The eyes. It's definitely starting to look like a water buffalo now, the one in our pictures. There's the agreement. The moo of agreement. From the cow's mouth comes the truth. Next is filters, just to bring out the recessed detail. I love these filters from Nick Productions. They can be applied straight to your acrylic paint surfaces. Extremely thin liquid, and I just gently brush this onto the horns, and it will settle in all the recessed little details, little pockets there. Next, I use a dark wash just to get a bit more of a dramatic effect. This is a wash, and it's a bit thicker than the filters, I find. So in this case, I apply a little bit to my paint tray. Next, I need to thin this, and it's an enamel product, so I can use odorless thinner. Any of the brands will be fine. And just thin the wash a little bit. The aim being to make sure that this will properly flow into all the little recessed details on our model. For instance, the hooves here, that's important. Just to get some contrasting detail there, and also on the horns, making sure that all that recessed detail is properly visible. And with the dry brushing that we applied earlier, we should now get a very nice effect. We're nearly at the end, and all that remains is the eyes. For this, I'm using solid black, and also the little line just to separate the hooves from the legs. Basically outlines that we're applying here. For this, you'll need a steady hand and a small brush, and there we go. This is perfect. The only thing we're lacking is the eyes. They're a bit dull, so I'll be using some gloss varnish just to get that glossy look on the eyes. The glossy look. This is carefully applied with a brush. And there we go. This is our completed water buffalo. It looks just like the real thing. I'm really thrilled with this result, and this is now ready to go into the diorama. As always, this is a list of all the products that I've used, all the paints, all the primers, and also the filters and the washes. They should be available from your local hobby store. So guys, that's it for episode 14. You can follow the rest of this build on my Instagram. I'm nearing the end of it. All sorts of fun things that still need to happen, building the groundwork, etc, etc. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for my horned friend for joining me in the studio. And we'll be seeing you in the next video.